Both of you guys mentioned Wagner, and I want to pivot quickly to a report from Lindsay Friedman published at Lawfare Media around Wagner war influencers broadcasting atrocities in Africa. And it's Juan, you took a look at this one. What is a war influencer? And help me understand what is the purpose of them flooding Telegram with graphic videos from Africa and like almost turning these atrocities into entertainment.
So I first of all, like Lindsay is a friend of LabsCon, and we've done some work together for the attempt to get the ICC to look at like some of the cyber attacks in the context of Ukraine as possible war crimes. There's a really interesting kind of logic that goes into that. The more that like I, at least worked with Lindsay and sort of tried to understand when you're trying to get things to the ICC, to the International Criminal Court, you're basically evaluating these different situations under the standards of like the Rome Statute. And there's a variety of ways in which you can essentially look at a situation that we as lay people may not consider war crimes, or that may not consider that they rise up to the significance of something like a war crime, but that actually does kind of fit into what the Rome Statute will look like. And I mean, I leave that to legal experts and folks like Lindsay that actually sort of understand the nuances there. But there is a certain amount of some of the kind of like glorification and defiling of the victims of some of these attacks, and like that kind of bizarre ultra extremist like dehumanization of victims does in some ways like rise up to what the ICC cares about. So what the Wagner folks were doing, and in some capacity are still doing, was this sort of like extremist recruitment glorification type tactics on Telegram, where they would, they were broadcasting the things they were doing, and they would show videos of people getting, I don't even know what the right term is, but essentially of a great deal of like frivolous violence and some pretty awful tactics, partly to stoke this base of like pro-Wagner, pro-Russian, largely let's just say the kind of ultra extremist folks that you would normally think of in these sorts of unsavory circles. And in that, like, that's one of the ways in which this sort of Wagner situation opens itself up to scrutiny. It is really fascinating. It's actually absolutely terrifying. And there's also, like, not only is there this kind of like surplus military type folks that tend to be roaming around places like Africa and the Middle East just looking for employment, willing to do a great deal of unsavory things. But, there's been discussions of like what the cyber components of this might have looked like. And it's a very interesting space. So I'm happy it's not just being let go because Prigozhin just sort of turned to dust.
Here's a question. You mentioned the ICC, and the argument here is that from the paper I read, that despite like all this evidence of them self-filming these things and publishing them on to terrorize civilians, recruit people, and so on, is the argument that the ICC has not done much to pursue these people for accountability. The ICC is also struggling with its own political problems, especially here in the United States. We don't even recognize it anymore. Like, what are we asking for? And over there too. Right, that's what I'm saying. Why? What are we really asking for when this court has been, I don't know, diminished? I don't know. How do you explain it?
I mean, look, I don't know. I'm not the best. I really should not be the person defending the ICC, mostly because as a proper terminally online netizen, I have a very skeptical view of international law and courts, right? Like, just as far as what the world that we live in, the legal system is just kind of like a weird barnacle that like every once in a while will cause some drag, and the rest of the time doesn't really factor in. That said, I mean, as you talk about the ICC is not just having issues with the US and the recognition in the US, but is also having some fairly significant, and it sounds like well-substantiated drama around the prosecutor general, and it's a pretty shitty story. And I think open to a great deal of scrutiny that maybe is kind of out of the realm of what this podcast usually goes into. But, there's a suggestion that there have been actions that were taken with great haste against Israel and some other folks um, in very convenient time, like unprecedented actions by the court in timing that's only convenient for the prosecutor facing a sexual harassment. And I mean, it sounds like pretty shitty scandal in his own office. And as that's coming out, it's like delegitimizing the court at the same time that you have this issue with the U.S. And it just sort of it just put them on whatever, like beyond the back foot as to what the ICC can do. That said, I mean, look at your comment, right? You're saying the ICC has not done anything about Wagner. Well, someone has to bring something up to the ICC like this and say, hey, this is worth prosecuting. So I think in that sense, like Lindsay has an amazing.
She had a connection to the court, right? I mean, I was reading her bio.
Yeah.
And she previously worked for the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. So she's familiar with all the intricacies of what that is and what's going on there. The Berkeley Law Human Rights Center submitted a dossier to the ICC using open source digital forensics to build up these war crime cases. And I guess the hope is that something is done. And this kind of like macabre entertainment, part politics, part disinformation is somehow, I don't know.
I think there's a hope in general. So, like, first of all, this is Lindsay. Lindsay is happy to tilt at some windmills, and like has the knowledge to actually make that substantive. So, like with the war crimes and like cyber attacks in Ukraine, I famously I became friends with Lindsay because I expressed some of my asinine opinions on a previous podcast that we used to call Glass House, and was rather insulting. And Lindsay, being a far more diplomatic and brilliant person, reached out and talked me through why I was wrong. And I ended up actually advising. This is why we don't fact check. I ended up advising the Human Rights Center at Berkeley, helping Lindsay. We put together like a small council of some of our friends to help substantiate this. And I mean, there is some hope to bring that up and to have it properly substantiated. There are aspects of the way that cyber was used in Ukraine that do fit the bill. Again, we might think of war crimes as something that should be something truly horrific at the levels of, we're talking about something coming out of like the Nuremberg trials, right? Like you think of this as at a different standard, but there is something to be said about, let's say, the cruelty of using something like InDestroyer, which is a tool that was created specifically to shut down power during the winter in a way that it didn't cause the damage they had hoped for, but had they done what they were trying to do, you're trying to disable power for a civilian population at a time when it would cause severe harm, right? Like there are ways in which you can kind of pull this off. So that's just to say, like, Lindsay's willing to take some of these swings, and I'm glad she is. And I hope the court takes some of these seriously, particularly with Wagner and what we're talking about in Africa, which is a fucking free-for-all between the Chinese and the Russians. And like the rest of us are just sitting it out and watching them fucking do it. So anything that puts any sand in those gears sounds like a good idea to me.
Costin, is there your favorite messaging app, Telegram? Is there a responsibility of Telegram here to somehow manage, mitigate this?
I was thinking exactly about that point because, the story talks about private channels on Telegram, like these white uncles, which has like paid subscribers, 200-300 paid subscribers, where the most gruesome videos are being shared, like the real stuff, the really gruesome stuff. And lately, I think especially after Durov was arrested in France, if you remember the story, we started observing the shutdown of cybercrime related channels on Telegram in a very, very aggressive fashion. So I used to monitor maybe like 50 different channels. I think 3/4 of those are now dead. All of them have been shut down, and all that kind of started after the arrest of Durov. So I don't know if that was some kind of deal he made to let him go, but basically until that moment, Telegram was free to operate pretty much. Shutdowns only happened when there was like some blatant abuse, like that was just too big to ignore, I guess. But the smaller things, as these channels distributing stolen materials or illegal tools or materials, I mean, they were just happily doing their thingy. But lately, every single month, a bunch of them are dying and disappearing and being shut down, deleted. So whatever Telegram is doing, I think they are way more active than before in censoring or shutting down these offensive channels. So I wonder why they're not taking care of these ones, promoting really, really bad stuff. I mean, yeah, killing people, eating, cannibalism, cooking body parts, tutorials on
Grok,
how.
is this true?
Yeah, it's true, sadly. I mean, according to the article, all this is being described in the Lawfare media article, so I'm not making things up. But yeah, there are a lot of bad things happening in the world, sadly. As Eric Weinstein would say, it's the end, man. It's the end.